Welcome, everyone, to episode 17 of the StarCraft 2 Weekly Whine Live. I'm your host, Ace, and today I'm joined by my good friend Miro. And we, of course, have GM Terran Nico from Ladder Legends. Say hello.
Salutations.
Hello, hello. And where could people find you? Do you have a channel people could follow you at? Shameless plug time.
Shameless plug time. I should probably do this personally, but I don't have a personal, so we're just going to do the Ladder Legends Twitch. I usually start streaming on there every week or so.
All right. And the link for that will be in the description for anybody who is interested. And yeah, so I set this up because I've always enjoyed open and honest conversations about balance, and I feel like it's a little bit hard to find in the community sometimes. So I hope to do my small part to change that with the show. If you enjoy, please consider giving a like or subscribe. And last week we were talking to Kneehead and focusing about the Protoss perspective and trying to understand how they're feeling about the patch. This week is going to be similar, but for Terran. And for any of the Zergs who are wondering, yeah, we're going to talk about Zerg next week. But for this week, it's all about Terran. So to start things off, I'll just ask, real simple, how do you guys feel about the strength of Terran overall? Too strong, too weak, just right? You know, no need to get into the individual matchups, just real briefly, how do you feel about Terran right now?
I think it's fine. Miro, you want to go?
I was actually going to say I'm going to let you go first, but you know.
All right. Well, I personally think it's fine. I'm a little bit weird when it comes to balance, where, to be honest, I don't really particularly care too much, but Terran is kind of in a decent spot. I always think of it as, like, this is the most controversial part of it, but we have the most flexible players, I think. I think Terran, just like as a race, is innovation. Not necessarily the pro player, but innovative, as in, like, we're the kind of guys that we say, fuck it, we're just gonna do whatever we want, and we're gonna find a way to make it work. It's gonna be random mind drop across the place, or just like. So like, I remember watching the what's it called, the like StarCraft intros not too long ago. To like, they were like, okay, what race do you want to play? Like the official Blizzard release for like Wings of Liberty, way back, like 15 years ago or whatever. And the Protoss one was like, oh, we've got super powerful, like, advanced technology. The Zerg was like, we're gonna overwhelm everyone. Terran was kind of like, yeah, we got, I'm gonna use the Warhammer term here, but we got faith, steel, and gunpowder. Like, we're outmatched, we're outgunned, but like, we're never gonna give up. And it's just like, that's kind of Terran in a nutshell.
Yeah.
It's the scrappy backwater, pull things out of your ass that somehow fucking work.
It's the Cowboys in space.
Yeah,
grit,
a good way of putting it.
You know?
There's an even better description. I think at one of the campaigns in Brood War, after like Aya's being decimated and Artanis like, oh, we gotta go get him. Reyna, on behalf of all Terrans, is just like, fuck it, sign me up, throw me in there, boys. Yeah. I'm all in. Why? I've got no reason not to.
Yeah, I think I remember. I'm trying to remember what the exact quote. It's something like, you know, we don't have anything else to do.
It makes me think of PvT Pull the Boys, where it's just like every game Pull the Boys because we've got nothing else to do.
It's like, fuck
there
it,
used to be
let's
a
go.
Thing. Yeah. There used to be a thing about that where, like, I don't know how long ago it was now. I remember talking to Groovy about this at some point, but, like, you used to see the Korean Terrans, they'd, like, just macro up to 4 bases, 80 workers. At some point, they just go to every single base, and they pull 80 workers, and they're going across the map against Protoss, 200 supply. Fuck it, we're all in. Just at the most random times. It was beautiful.
Oh, man.
I love it.
All right,
as frustrating
Miro.
as it was to feel like you could do that. Oh god. Feel like in general, Terran's in a bit of a weird, because I feel like I don't think it's in a bad spot. Let me be very. I actually a pretty spot. It's just a weird spot. And it feels weird when you're playing because the 300 minerals ZZ change, I have maintained so far that it is and has been complete over. But it also feels really weird to play because like you see games where a Terran is placing their third base down or like building their third base before the Zerg is building their third base. And it's like it doesn't feel natural.
It doesn't feel right. Yeah.
It feels very strange and like on the one hand I can see certain maps really enable that. Fear and Faith is a good example of this, where Clem versus Cyril, Ace and I were talking about this earlier. The first series, Clem basically does a 3cc build into mech. Spoilers, I'm not going to say anything more than that. But basically, I think he dropped his third base at like 2 minutes and 10 seconds or something like that before Cyril had dropped his. Now, Cyril wasn't playing quite as greedy. He wasn't going 3 hatch before pool, but he was still being Zerg and doing a very standard.
He was still going for the fast third. So I'll butt in a little bit here, just because like Zerg build orders. So like with Zerg, if you're going for the 4 queen opener, then your hatch is going to be at like 330, 340, and that's the latest that you can do it and have it still be like a normal macro build. So he went for the 32 supply third base at 315, which is pretty normal. It's not really like that greedy. Like the greediest you could probably do while still doing like a normal like hatch gas pool opener would be you could technically do like a 25 third base, but I think the greediest really realistically is like a 27, 28 supply third base. So not that far off from like the greediest that you could do, because Zerg like already we just kind of play the greediest style that we can.
And again, that's assuming that you're not going for 3 hatch.
Yeah.
Which, to be fair, on Fear and Faith isn't something that's impossible to do because of random
big gamble, but yeah.
Yeah.
I think the problem with 2 hatch before pool is you just die to the Reaper.
Yeah, true. But again, that's dependent on spawn location. Why on 4-player maps it's a lot more feasible. You wouldn't do that on a single-player map or a map with limited.
The good news is it's 3cc season, so you don't have to worry about the Reaper. It just doesn't exist anymore. True.
Very true.
I mean, if he goes CC first, there's not going to be a Reaper anytime soon. Just macro up.
I guess my point was the change to the command center means I feel like I always have an excess of minerals, but I can never spend that excess because it's like there's like a weird balance of I have more minerals than I need, but not enough to actually build additional production. And if I don't build additional production, then it's the balance is very weird and finicky because there's always like, there's always a specific number of barracks or factories that you need on a certain amount of bases, because otherwise you are underproducing or overproducing. So having the excess minerals always feels really weird, and you want to do something with it.
Yeah, and I would say, like, in general, I think Terran is probably like the least flexible with build orders in a weird way, because I don't know, it's kind of funny because like Terran has so many different builds that can kind of like transition into each other in different ways, and I'm talking about like the openings a little bit, but like at the same time, once you're actually gearing up for like a push or something like that, like it has to be like perfectly matched to your income, and you kind of have to have like the perfect add-on structure for that, and that takes like a lot of pre-planning, and like the time it takes for a Terran to be able to like finally craft that kind of a build order is a lot longer than I think it is for the other races. So I think my point really is similar to when Protoss got the gateway change, and we're like, watching all these Protosses not use the new gateway. Like, I think it's very similar here, where it's just going to take a little while before Terran can, like, optimize the build orders to really take advantage of the 300 mineral CC.
I don't think the 300 mineral CC is sticking around. Just straight up, I just don't see it happening.
I hope not.
It
makes no sense.
I mean, it's beyond dumb, if you ask me, so...
Like,
one of the things that I'm a little bit, again, sort of controversial for, I would say, or at least I would think so. I haven't actually heard anyone say this, but like, we shouldn't make plans on these necessarily sticking around, because we don't know what's going to happen, and ultimately, like, I'm annoyed about this change in particular. Like, the 8 worker start is fine, because this kind of goes against my understanding of Terran in general. Which, actually hearing you guys is a little bit interesting to hear that Terran, I don't think, is a macro race. It's not. Our unit design does not support macro, and I think the 300cc is trying to force that, and it like does it in such an awkward way that it still goes against what it's supposed to be going for.
Yeah. So when you say
inherently agree with that,
sorry,
and I'm sorry, I do want to butt in here. I don't inherently disagree, but I also don't agree completely, because Terran has always been very split with how they've functioned as a race, with being primarily bio or primarily mech. And if you're meching, you're going to be always having a much game. So there's always
sorry, Miro, can you move a little bit closer to your mic? You're just cutting out a little bit.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Done. What I was saying is that Terran's always been a little bit split with how their production works and how their kind of game plan has worked. And so I feel like if you have played mech, you're inherently going to be playing generally a more macro-oriented game than you would with bio. And while bio can play macro, and I don't think that's a bad thing, while bio can play macro, they've always leaned into a lot more of the aggressive plays rather than the long macro games. Bio Terran doesn't generally want to be playing long macro games, because that increases the risk of fuck-ups, and it increases, the difficulty of being able to consistently split against things and have your attention pulled in multiple directions when you can't afford to do that. And Marines fall off as the game goes onwards, so you want to have transitions to different things, which for Ghosts and the current state of Ghosts, I guess, is fine and has always been. And I don't mean in the sense of the Ghost is fine in a balanced state. I mean, like, yeah, you can do that with the Ghost, but it doesn't feel quite so like playing a macro game as Bioterran doesn't feel like it's what you want to do, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But playing a macro game with mech, yeah, you absolutely would want to do that. It's just hard to do once you get to the like it falls into the quadrant problem. Once you get to that 4 base, then taking the 5th base becomes a real problem, because your ability to move around the map becomes limited.
You're cutting out again.
That might just be me talking softly.
Trailing off.
Yeah, trailing off.
Yeah.
A little bit. Okay, well, my response to that is, you do actually have a fair point with mech. I come at this mostly from a bio perspective, and
yeah,
I will. Well, for anyone that doesn't know, I am a coach for Ladder Legends. I'm the Terran coach at the moment, and I'm very much a subscriber to the Gamer Richie sort of playstyle, which is 2 base aggression. Let's end the game before it really gets anywhere.
As you like to say, be a dick.
As Terran is meant to be played. Yes.
Yeah. With the kings of being assholes, right?
Yeah.
Now, that doesn't mean, and I've actually had this conversation with him a couple of times, both of us are capable of playing macro styles. So, like, I can play 3 base, I can play 4 base onwards. but it's not as you describe it. It's not inherent. Specifically with bio, it's not like the natural order of things. And I actually break this down in some of my sessions with some of my students, particularly the master guys, in order to try and figure out, okay, how do they want to develop their style moving forward? But the key problem is when you actually look at bio and how it interacts with the game, and to some of an extent, mech as well. Terran is the king of the early game. That is the way I genuinely see it. I think if your micro is good enough, Terran beats whatever you face against. So one of the descriptions I often use is that, like, Marines will beat Zerglings as long as the Zerglings don't have, like, an upgrade advantage. So this is where, like, upgrades come in. So if they have speed, obviously, if you don't have stim, then the Zerglings win because they negate your ability to micro. And the same thing sort of happens with Blink Stalkers or Charge. Like, you have a small window before upgrades come in. So this is why proxies are so strong against Zerg. And this is why, like, one base pushers are pretty strong against Protoss. They don't have charge, they don't have speed, really, really easy to deal with. But then there's a little bit of a time window before you get stim. And once stim comes online, because we can now micro really, really well, our units just completely walk through gateway units or Zerg. But then you have this really awkward window again, sort of around like the it used to be like the what is this, like 8-9 minute mark. Now it might be more like 10 and 11 minutes. Once like multiple forms of splash of Protoss come in line, then Terran again kind of like hits a wall with bio where it's like, okay, we were destroying gateway units. We can split against the Storm, we can focus the Colossus, but if there's Disruptors, Storm, Colossus, all at once, Blink Stalkers, we can't deal with all of that at once. Until we get our late game. And when I say late game, I don't mean 3-4 bases, because I think there's a little bit of a misconception in the community where, like, late game is like, oh, you get your third base.
Base count?
No. I'm talking like 5, 6, 7 bases here, where I'm printing 8 libs at a time from full starports.
Yeah.
Because once you hit, like, lib, ghost, mech, that's the strongest composition if you can micro it in the game, I think, with the exception of maybe Skytoss. Even then, I'm not too sure, because that's not really a situation I get into. But, like, then there's this massive window where you've got, like, 2 base bio, you'll dominate your opponent, and then you've got, like, ultra late game Terran, where the mules come in, you can have 200 supply of fucking terrifying. That's kind of the way I see it at the moment. But the 300cc in particular really fucks up the balance between that. So I think that's where a lot of this conversation is coming from.
Yeah. Yeah, I was going to ask when you said the Terran is, like, not inherently a macro race by default, right? Like, but you kind of answered my question, you know? Like, I was wondering if you were, you know, seeing it from the perspective of, you know, Terran is like the tempo aggression-based race early on, and it sounds like that's your perspective, which is how I think about it too. You know, it's kind of like that is a massive strength for you to have as the race, you know? So, like, it kind of feels weird if Terran is ever in a state where they can just, like, 3cc macro and not have to put on pressure in the early and mid game. Like, that feels wrong to me. Like, it just feels like it's the wrong design of the race, which is why, you know, a little off track here, but I've been very frustrated with the, like, 3cc 111 meta that we had for, like, 8 years before this. And for a little while, it felt like before the 300cc, it felt like Terrans were actually doing, like, 1 and 2 base aggression versus Zerg again, because they realized, like, hey, we actually can't just go pure macro anymore. And that felt like a return to normalcy to me. So, you know, it's like, I understand why, you know, like, it's a significant balance change, right? So I can understand why a lot of Terrans would be upset by that and be like, yeah, the 300cc is justified because of this. But I personally feel like, you know, what we had before was wrong. and before we had the 300cc, we were kind of in a state that was, like, a little bit closer to what I considered normal.
Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. I think that the option to go 3cc should be there, but it should be a risk, right? Because, like, that should be significant greed.
Yeah.
And if you get away with it, you should be able, like, it should benefit you, but you should also be punishable for it. and I kind of feel like the risk versus reward has been skewed in recent years, where like 3cc builds were the meta for a really long time, and I don't think they should be the meta. I think they should be a choice based off the map that you are playing on and the opponent that you are playing against.
Yeah.
Rather than, this is my go-to build. You know?
Yeah.
And then also, I mean, like, I don't know, it's weird because it's like, I think about this and I just have to wonder, you know, like, what does that look like? Right? Because, you know, like, if we have, like, Serral, and if you're up against Serral and you're thinking to yourself as a Terran player, do I go macro or do I go aggressive? It would feel really weird to me if you're like, I'm going to go macro because I know he's not going to do anything. He's Serral. He's just going to sit back. So that means I can also macro. Like, to me, that feels wrong because Serral is Zerg. You know, like, if you're going up against the highly economic based race, and your plan is to let them be as greedy as they want, and somehow you're going to pull ahead of them, even though they have, like, the race advantage in that area of the game, like, that feels wrong to me.
Yeah.
You know?
Would you guys like to hear my theory on this? Because it's actually quite an interesting point.
Absolutely.
And sort of... So, I've been thinking about this for a while. Now, there needs to be... Like, the first thing that needs to be understood is, as I see it, there is a clear distinction between, like, I define the game into two categories, where there's, like, 6k plus and everyone else. And
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
I'm in that weird space at the moment, as a player, just personally, in that I can sort of start seeing into that 6k plus category, but it's a completely different world and it doesn't make sense to me. So... Actually, I've been asked this question a few times. Again, if anyone's listening, wondering that if I'm Nicorect, the 6k player, I'm not. I'm Nico, a different guy who is I'm at 5.3 at the moment, generally speaking, although starting to push higher. Now, I have spoken to Nicorect a couple of times, and I've talked to him in just, like, some theory crafting, just a little bit, and I was like, I think I remember asking one time, just like, well, what do you think about, like, doing 2 base, like, 5-1-1 against Zerg? And he just said, it's not possible at 6k plus, because, like, you just won't kill them. I think that's the problem with the higher level, where, and I having played against some of these guys, it's like, I have been doing everything right. I'm doing so much pressure, they are just able to get that, like, extra round of drones in still, and then eventually you run out of steam. So 3cc kind of came in as sort of just like, well, if we do the full-on aggression, like, there is a very strong chance they're so good at defending that you can't actually break them. Like, breaking them is not a consistent strategy, so they have to prepare for the late game. And then it got to the point where they realized, oh, actually, they aren't going to be able to pressure me, because, for example, Zerg is kind of the macro race. If they're doing 2 base aggression, I'm doing 2 base aggression, I win that. So with 3cc, I just take the 3rd base, get my units out, and if they try and do pressure, I can defend it. You defend it, you win the game. So that's kind of like the high level, and this is kind of where we look at the pros, and that's kind of what seems to be happening most of the time, I think. Where it's kind of they're forced into playing the longer game, because they can't break their opponent earlier, so very, very coin flippy. Now, for the rest of us mere mortals, I was going to call us plebs, but realistically, like, we're just normal human guys, right? I don't think that applies. So I think there's a huge, like, thing about StarCraft players that we love or not even just StarCraft players, in every game I play this happens. They just look at the pros and they copy it without actually understanding why, truly. So they don't understand all the mind games, they don't understand all the, like, what's going on to get to that point in the first place, because I'll be honest, I haven't a clue what the fuck is going on through most of these guys' heads. It's way beyond me. And then we kind of just fall into the misconception of this is the only way to play. When realistically, like, I have a 60% win rate in most of my matchups just by doing 2 base. Every single time. and it's just because I kill my opponent because that's when Terran is strong.
Mhm.
I don't know what you guys think about that.
Well,
So
I do have one small thing to say there, which is that, and this is just because, like, TVZ is the matchup that I probably know the best because
Yep.
I've spent, like, I mean, I probably spent like half a summer, like half of my waking hours of the summer playing Pete modes with people in my clan. Most of them were Terran, and it was like, this is when I was really getting into StarCraft. So that's the matchup
Yeah.
that I know it inside and out. And I would say that, two-base aggression, like, if your problem is not being able to kill the Zerg, like, I think you might be thinking about it a little bit wrong, in the sense that, like, I think the goal should really be to just force the Zerg to not make drones. Force them to make units instead of drones. As long as you're forcing them to make army instead of drones, and you're not losing your army, you're doing your job correctly. Because if you can snowball your army while you're making army and workers, and you're upgrading all your stuff, and the Zerg is forced to make nothing but army, because you're constantly flashing your army in their face and forcing them to respect your threat, that's when their economy is going to suffer. Because they're sitting there making nothing but army, and you're making army and workers. So, that's my very brief take on that,
That's fair. That's how you create a lead. So, actually, that's a very, very good point. So, in the server we have, there are quite a few Terran students at the moment that I'm telling, you guys got to be like aggressive and 2-base, and actually occasionally give them the rule, you're not allowed to take a third at all.
Yeah.
And this is why develop the idea that you need to really be going, because sometimes I'll look at their replays and they'll be sitting there in the middle of the map for a minute or half a minute. I'm just like, guys, you look at the units count. You
what are
could've
these
just
units
straight up
doing?
killed them.
Yeah.
Like, you got to get going. So the idea is that you got to create pressure and be like, just in the back of the head, I'm on a timer. And that's how I view the game. But that is correct. So you do actually have two options. One, if the opponent doesn't have enough stuff, you just kill them. That's most of my games. If they have too much stuff, you go home, you take your third CC, and you let them kill themselves, because they just made too much stuff. But then there's the weird middle ground. Well, I said two options. So the third one is they have just about enough to hold off, and that's where the like shaving off units constantly comes into play. Now, when I say kill them, like just in the first instance, that's the simplified version of like, obviously you can't just go across the map and kill them. Sometimes you do actually have to play this constant trading and shaving game, and that is where the strength of Terran comes in, because you can run away, kill a bunch of units, and take no damage in return almost. Like with the Kings of Stutter Stepping. The other problem is that it's just very, very micro dependent, and I think that also ties into this, that just a lot of people aren't comfortable in knowing how to take engagements, or how to read it. So I think the higher up you go and the more you play, and if you watch high level players, you kind of get a sense for like, okay, now they should have this much at this time, and if that doesn't happen, then you can always back off, because you know that they've got not enough behind. But it's hard. It's a skill that you develop over like years of playing, essentially. It's not too easy. And I was going somewhere else.
Point that out, because I do feel like that's particularly apt for Zerg matchup, but Protoss always feels like it's a very different beast. It always feels like it's very hard to actually get in and aggress on them in a way that I feel like Zerg just, because Zerg they have a lot of units, yes, but a lot of their units are flimsy. Whereas if you look at Protoss, especially in more recent times, it's been, the Gateway Man style has been very swarmy, but the problem with very swarmy Protoss is Protoss units are also really fucking strong.
Yeah.
So scary. Continue.
No, wait. Are you saying it's an issue
scary.
that we have a race that has like a better early game economy than Zerg, makes stronger units than Zerg, and produces them faster than Zerg? Wait. Is this an issue?
Sounds like 3CC8 racks to me, but continue.
Yeah. I do think an element can be made. So I agree that again, before we go on, like the two base aggression, I think is really good. I think that that's something that people need to lean into more, and it's something that I've been trying to lean into more. But I also think there's something to be said of like knowing when to transition and when, like, being able to recognize the game state of you haven't done enough or you haven't been able to get enough and you need to transition so you don't just immediately lose the game.
Yeah. It's objectively a
And
harder style to play.
So my
Yeah.
counter argument, it's the same thing, but it looks different. It's kind of crazy. Again, my win rate in Pro TVP is about 60% most of the time. And again, it is just 2 base 5-1-1. And the thing is, right, so they have the third base down. Sure. They're starting to saturate it. Sure. If they're saturating the gas, then they don't have the income to, like, spam out zealots. If they spam out zealots, then you shave off all the zealots because they're basically just faster zerglings. You come across, you kill like 8 to 10 zealots, and you just walk away. And then you just keep going. If you cannot, like, overwhelm them in one fight. The other option is you can do what I care anyway, and just go for it, and you'll find actually it's a very, very small window most of the time that you can overwhelm your opponents. Now, this doesn't apply to...
You cut out, Nico.
Work. I've beaten 2 6K Protosses doing it, but it like cut out of it. But the idea is kind of the
are you
same.
cutting? Is he cutting out for you as well?
Yeah. It's something. I think it might be Discord. I'm not sure.
I can
you're
see
cutting out a little
his
bit, Nico.
icon. Yeah, you're cutting out now.
Hold on. It might be because I turned the fan on. Let me turn it off and see if that helps. Am I still cutting out?
All good.
You're okay at the moment.
Okay, so it probably was the fan. Rip. Never mind. Okay, where was I before I stopped cutting out?
Like
Gosh.
a minute ago. You mentioned something about beating 2 6K Protosses, and you also, but you kind of cut off before that as well. So
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
okay,
there was a
confused
very
about the whole
small
idea.
window. There was a very small window, is what you said.
I'm gonna blame the fan. Right. Okay, so I'll restart the whole thing. So, basically, in terms of dealing with Protoss, well, it's the same as Zerg in that they take an extra base. But they're saturating the base, and it takes time for that to be worth it, because they're investing in the probes and they're investing in the base itself. Now, if you hit at the correct time, if you hit with a proper 2-base push, they do not yet have the economy to have the third base be worth it. Unless they take it super early, in which case you adapt your build and do a different type of pressure. Like if they're taking a third at, like, this used to be in the old patch like 330, then you do like more aggressive mine drops, 3 mines or whatever, because they can't, or speed banshees because they can't punish you for it. But aside from that, they don't have the production kick in yet. So you have a window where you can overwhelm your opponent. I go for it, but that requires very, very good micro positioning and just reading the engagement. If you cannot go for it and they have enough, which is what I did when I beat the 6K Protosses, I shaved a bunch of units off, and then I just left, like, backed off, waited for my constant production because I'm doing 5-1-1 and I keep having units, and then I go in again. And I shave 8 to 10 more zealots off, and you just keep doing that until you wear them down, because they cannot actually keep up with that economy. It's too much to overwhelm them. But again, it's very, very micro-dependent. This doesn't work as well against the higher level Protosses. So as I said, I've only done this twice against 2 6K Protosses. I think you do have to macro out at some point, but again, just TVP's been a weird matchup for a while because of all the, like, incremental buffs Protosses has. Like this very much used to be the style like 5-6 years ago, but now it's kind of weird, where it's like you gotta hope that you can survive until a max out, sit turtle on 3 bases, and then win the max out army. But you're rushing for the late game because late game Terran beats late game Protoss. So you got those 2 options where this kind of comes back to the whole idea of you've got your 2 base or this, or the super late game. If you don't have the micro to survive to the late game, then you're not going to make it.
Yeah, I think Terran is kind of interesting because I I was kind of thinking about this the other day and trying to think of a good analogy for this. It's like, you know, with all the races, you know, most people, they generally, to put it not too kindly, you know, most people suck at like your early game, you know, just your opening build order. You know, sorry to put everybody on blast, but
It is, yeah, it is very hard.
we all know this. We all suck at our early game. We get supply blocks. We mess up, you know. And this is the reason why most people don't get masters or higher than that. You know, I would say like around masters is usually when people's build orders like start to coalesce and those early game mistakes start to get eliminated. Right. But what's interesting about that is like for Terran, the micro requirement of your army is so strong that like it's like an extra layer of challenge. But like the capability that you get once you achieve that is insane. So like my metaphor is kind of like it's like learning to ride a bike instead of learning to ride like a scooter. You know, like a scooter is very easy. It's got handlebars. You know, you put one leg on the scooter and one leg on the ground and you push. Very easy, right? A bike, a little bit harder, right? But once you can ride the bike, man, you're going to be doing tricks and you're going to be zooming. You know? It's great. Yeah. That's kind of what Terran is like.
This is slightly controversial again. Like, I'm, as you guys can tell, a very controversial man, but I usually keep to myself for this reason. I genuinely think, yes, I am a Terran. Terran is the hardest race. And I don't mean that as in, like, you can't be good at it, but it does have so much more going on for us than I think the other races. Like, Terran production is constant, so you constantly have to be producing units. If you miss your cycle of Marines, that's it. Gone. Yeah. Shadow Realm. Forget about it. Never coming back. Protoss, they can make 50 Zealots at once, who fucking cares? They can instantly warp in an army. Yes, technically it's the same thing, but their army is kind of like on cooldown. So it's in like a cycle, they only have to come back to it once every 20 seconds.
Yeah.
Done. With Zerg, you print 50 Ultras at once, who cares?
Yep.
So
it's
like,
even easier than Protoss
because you
don't have a Robo or Stargate. Yeah.
I mean, still. Like,
well, just for the production.
The idea is that for the production, it's with Terran, it's constant. But then also, yes, the micro capabilities. With the exception of Blink Stalkers, nothing the other races have are nearly as microable as Terran. You can micro every Terran unit, and I constantly say this in my sessions, if you can micro your units correctly, you get more value out of them. That does not apply really as much for any other unit for the other races, with the exception of Blink Stalkers. Like, maybe Mutalisks, because like they're kind of like Terran Marines but fly.
I'd
call that's kind of it.
The Banshees, but yeah.
But yeah, even then, they do have the little bit of the drawback where they're very, very fragile and straight up fights. But like, if you look at Terran fights in the late game, how much do we actually have to do? And I don't think the other races clock this sometimes. Like, yes, it looks like we don't have much to do either, but we have to stin, we have to stutter step, we have to focus fire. Usually Vikings, Liberators, Mines, Tanks, all of those could be focus fired. Potentially Marauders as well. You've got an EMP, you've got a snipe, you maybe have to siege up in the first place. Like, that's already 11 things that I listed off my hand. I cannot think, except for like maybe like Super Spellcaster, Heavy Protoss, and Zerg armies, set anything nearly as close. Like, I normally end up with like 6 different items on my hand. And yes, like, it's so much easier to say, and the actual game itself looks very, very different. But I don't play the other races. I can comfortably actually start microing them to an extent after playing a couple of times. I have never once in my life seen like a high-level player from the other races do nearly as well with Terran as they did with their primary race. Not once.
Yeah. Terran, like, I mean, there's a reason why, like, what's the phrase people say? It's like, it's most difficult to master, but it just has like a really high skill ceiling, you know? So if you're able to master the race, then all of a sudden it's like, you have all these opportunities to outplay your opponent that are available to you.
Yeah.
But you only get there after you master Terran, and that is
correct.
Hard.
I also just want to preface, because I don't want to sound like I'm too much of a dick. I know we're the professional assholes as Terran, but that doesn't mean the other races are easy. I started playing
course not.
Protoss
for sure.
when I started playing the ladder. I played Protoss, I got sick of losing, and I switched to Terran because it was way more comfortable and way more playstyle. But I kind of still remember just the feeling of Protoss, and it was just too like snowbally for me almost.
Yeah.
StarCraft is an inherently difficult game. Anyone who says that one race is easy or whatever is lying to themselves, because the reality is that there's all, like, for every race has so many things that they have to do and they have to think about, and every race is different, and that's part of what makes StarCraft a beautiful game, is that every race is.
Yeah.
Yes, there are pain points for each race. There, the difficulty of walling off for Protoss is, keeping unit in the wall without having it run away, and trying to have units go through the wall while you're also trying to defend run bys and be over here, and being able to balance your minerals and gas and everything for your build orders, and balancing taking your third base at the earliest possible time on fuck all gateways and everything else, and being able to hold off like 2 units is not an easy thing to do for the most part. But and then Zerg has like creep spread and injects, and you got to set up your surrounds and make sure your banelings don't roll into marauders and all that sort of stuff, and you got to do vipers, and Terran has to do split, stutter step, siege up, micro, burrow, unburrow, widowmine, snipe, EMP. So when you're looking at a fight specifically, it might look very one-sided for the amount of things that goes on, and sometimes that is the case. But you also don't necessarily see everything else that is going on in the background as well, and I think that's something that a lot of people just don't think about. And I'm kind of with you on that. And shocking, I know, another Terran agreeing with another Terran player that Terran is the hardest. But my thing has always been,
all the presses. Terrans say Terran is the hardest race.
My thing has always been, Terran is the easiest to learn, but the hardest to master.
Yeah.
And
I like to describe it as every race has something that's easier than another race.
Yeah. And I would say, like, for Terran, I think, like, the thing that you guys have easiest is, like, army composition. Like, you as Terran can kind of just choose your army comp, and you just, like, rotate your supporting units, Whereas when you play, like, Zerg or Protoss, like, you might have to adjust your entire composition based off of what your opponent's doing. That's just a different dynamic, you know what I mean?
The production cycle is also really simple as well. Like, you have to do it constantly. That's why it's hard, but it's simple.
Yep.
Yeah, I agree.
Yep.
I will say, this is something that really shits me, because there are a lot of people who sit there and go, well, why don't you just play both bio and mech? And I'm sitting there like, that's not how this works. It's like, that's not how the race works.
You go and try it. Come back, tell me how it goes. And if you
tell
can
me how
make
it
it work,
goes for
I will
you.
give you a firm handshake. I'll do that.
Please tell me why we should use Marines as a frontline anti-air for siege tanks, Thors, and Hellbats. That's the best idea I've ever heard.
I remember thinking that stuff when I was like bronze.
I mean, it does.
Okay. Hang on.
That's when you're transitioning.
I gotta ask. We gotta ask some more specific patch questions here, because we were talking a lot about Terran in general here, and I love it. I really do. But I think the people want to know about the patch.
Sorry.
So I gotta ask. So this is something I was asking a little bit with Protoss last week. So, do you guys think it's weird how we've reduced the starting worker count and increased the cost of bases because they don't give you the same supply anymore, right? So we're making it harder to expand and trying to slow the game down a little bit. But then at the same time, we're speeding things up, and we're giving Terran an economy buff with the 300 mineral CC, and we're giving Protoss a production buff with the speed gateways, and we're giving Zerg a production buff with the larva change. Does that feel weird to you guys?
Listen,
No, it's completely 100%
Blizzard
expected.
is a multi-dollar company, all right? They do not have the production costs for an elite RTS designing team, right?
Oh shit.
It's out of the budget.
Okay, but you know what
They
else
have
they
like
are?
$3 between them.
They're also a multi-person company. One person has to get the game out, and the other person rakes the money in.
Oh shit. I didn't know we were gonna come in with the sick burns.
Listen, this is my
look.
favorite game, but they don't know what they're doing. Although I can understand it from the idea that they're trying to, and this is the way I saw it. They're trying to encourage people to play more safe, just in general. So the idea is, if you can increase the production early on, you can't expand as fast, because if you expand too quickly, you just die.
Yeah.
Lo and behold, that is exactly how I play, and that is how I have continued to play, and it's working out pretty well for me. The problem, I think, is that the community has gotten used to just going speedrun to the late game for the last 5, 6 odd years, if not longer than that. So, I cannot... a bit of a tangent. I cannot get over how annoyed I get sometimes with some of the students saying, but I want to play macro. I'm like, that isn't how the game works. If you're trying to, like, climb as quick as possible, that's not how it works. Not to say that that can't be done, but, like, it's contradictory to the, like, just design of the race and the game in general.
Yeah.
They're trying to speedrun the hard part. I'm like, guys, there is a process. Learn the early game first. But, sorry, that's my tangent over.
See,
No, I mean that makes perfect sense.
I think the perhaps the biggest issue I have with the mentality of, like, be aggressive, always be aggressive, is that there's a point where you do take it to an extreme. And I think that it's really good to know how to be aggressive, but I also think knowing how to macro is really, well, knowing how and when to transition. And I think that's something that a lot of people really struggle with, because they focus so much on the micro aspect and on the being aggressive and two-basing aspect, that the moment they have to go past that, everything falls apart for them. And I think that's kind of the big schism, for lack of a better term, where between, like, before 6K and after 6K is, like, before 6K, nobody knows how to fucking macro at that point. You know, playing long games is really hard to do as any race, but as Terran and Bio-Terran in particular, it's really fucking hard to do. But when you're at that 6K level, then your macro has started to become really, really solid, and you can still rely on your aggression. You can still play aggressive, but you have the skill and the knowledge of when and how to do those transitions without also simultaneously killing yourself.
Yeah, I mean, that's correct. Just straight up, that is correct. Again, the counter argument there is that there comes a point where you will learn to transition out regardless, because you start realizing you've kind of maxed out how much pressure you can put on in the early stages of the game. It's a much higher ceiling than people realize, but that's kind of where I'm at, where now I'm beginning to transition out of putting my constant pressure. However, that, like, is a ceiling beyond where most people are currently at, and I tell them it's like, that is something you will learn later. We can take a look at how to transition out later. For the moment, you really need to master your early bases, or like early game, because your transition later doesn't matter. You will win more games now if you learn to improve your aggression. And also, it has the carryover effect that you were kind of saying, where if you can control your early game army well, in that case, then you can control your late game army well as well, because you get used to the sort of just micro concepts. And also, you become a lot more aware of positioning. It's slightly different when you start adding stuff like tanks.
I think
and
when you
liberates
do,
and
like,
everything.
early game pressure, like, you become way more time sensitive.
Correct. I have a killer instinct in that I will usually put on so much pressure, I can see that there's a window here and I go for it. The difference between me winning and losing the game is less than 5 seconds in some cases.
Yep.
That's how sensitive it is, and I really think that's an important skill for Terrans to develop.
Yeah. I agree with that. I think that, and I'm gonna call out a couple of people here, not directly, but like I've seen in even at high level games, and I'm talking about above 6K. Like I will forever remember the series between Cyril Classic, and Classic was very clearly going for a timing that he then missed by like a full 30 seconds.
Oof.
And I'm sitting there like, this is something that a Terran can't afford to do, because if you miss a timing by 3 or 4 seconds at that level, you are immediately dead, you know, or your timing is no longer going to have the same effect, and you are behind as a direct result. Yeah. But
that's another 20
like
links.
That's not something that you can, like, it's not as impactful for the other races, I would argue. I think that there is an element of that where that, you know, like Zerg doing a roach rush is very tight depending on the itself, or a Nidus one timing against like a 3cc build. Ace and I have talked about this in the past, where it, like, those timings are tight, but I do feel like it's nowhere nearly as strict. And I feel like your build order as a Terran has to be extremely strict and extremely tight to the nth degree, and that just doesn't exist with.
I think it depends on what you're going for, you know.
Yeah,
I think it really depends on what you're going for. There's certain Zerg builds where, like, you have no margin of error, you know. So I don't know. I think it depends on the build.
Yeah, I mean, I'd argue that margin of error is in a slightly different aspect. I mean, again, the whole idea is that it can be argued that that's the case for everyone anyway, right?
Yeah.
So it's a hard one.
Yeah. And I mean, you know, if we're talking about, like, you know, balancing on a knife's edge, it's like, well, what is that edge between? That's between one player winning and the other player winning. So how is it not the same thing for the other player on the other side of it? Right?
Exactly. That's a really good way of putting it.
I think we can, I think we probably move on a little bit to, how do we think about, well, I just want to ask briefly, like, you know, I gotta still ask more 300cc questions. Do your early game builds feel smoother now? Because that was like,
nope,
the reason. Oh no.
No.
I was gonna say that's the reason why we did that for Zerg with the larva buff, because like we had build orders that were just crappy because we didn't have the larva. And then I heard the same thing from, you know, from you a lot, Miro, and from other Terrans as well, about like the gaps in SCV production for early game build order. And it's like,
yeah, that hasn't fixed
that help you at
because
all?
Like,
didn't fix you.
Yes.
Okay.
No, because the gaps in the SCV,
because you make the barracks. Yeah. It's when you make the barracks and the gas, right? And that all before the fucking CC. So what does that make a difference? Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you want to fix the you want to fix the SCV production, right? Here's the trick: make every single structure, building, and unit cost the same proportion as when it was 12 worker start.
Oh shit.
That's how you fixed it. Because as is, like, the proportion of the CC's changed. Okay, so fun fact, I think no, it's still not cheap enough to match the proportion of income when you had 12 workers, because it's 8 out of 12, which isn't a 3/4, although the cost is now 3/4. But the problem is refineries are still the same, Marines, Reapers still the same, depots still the same. Like, if you want to mathematically make it the same, that's how you'd fix it. So it actually needs to go down. That's what we're learning here. But no, the issue, like, with the original 400cc, we had to pull workers, yes, but like I figured out builds that were kind of like comfortable with that, where it's like, okay, we realize the game pace has now slowed down. With the 300cc, it's back to the original, just like, what the fuck's going on? Because the mismatch is between how economically you want to be greedy, because it really incentivizes you to be greedy. But again, that's contradictory to the race. So then, like, you kind of start saying, okay, I don't really have a timing for my extra bases. but at the same time, I can't be as aggressive still. It just doesn't. The math is not math.
Yeah, it definitely doesn't. It hasn't fixed what they intended to fix. Is what I'll say. 'Cause, like I will say, like the 300cc is fucking disgustingly strong. Like it really is disgustingly strong. But it has not fixed what they wanted to fix. And I do think that, like, if you're aiming to fix this, I want to call it a disparity because it's not quite what I'm getting at. It's more, you're aiming, like, if you're aiming to fix the having to skip SCVs to get certain timings of the initial Reaper, for example, was the example that you brought up earlier, then you have to fundamentally either change the game or change the cost of the Reaper or the cost of the refinery or whatever to get the amount out, or how much gas that you pull from refineries.
You would have to like
do something
Reaper
like that.
25 gas or something like that. Yeah.
Which has huge knock-on effects in its own right.
Yeah. That would be crazy for Reaper rushes.
God,
I already face enough Reaper rushes. There's multiple people I know that just do nothing but 2-Rex Reaper me, and I'm like, guys,
Ew.
I can make 2 Marines for every Reaper you have, and you jump off the cliff, I kill one for free. Like, it just doesn't work.
Oh, wow.
It's a weird one. But yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting one.
I've managed to railroad us into just talking about Terran as a general concept. Do you have like
No.
any
What's interesting is like we actually. So I have like 3 questions that we like hit during our general Terran discussion. Ironically, like I was gonna ask about like Zerg larva change, and like how I talked about like there was a bit of a disparity with like Terran being able to go 3cc 111 and Zerg can't really do anything to punish it, but they're still successful playing macro against the macro race, and like, does that feel weird? I don't know. I guess there is something else that I wanted to talk about with this, which is so like we did the Zerg larva change because of Zerg was like hit the hardest by the worker change and like the base changes giving you less supply, and then also Zerg was just like weak before the patches. Like, I mean, I have the balance stats on screen, people can see them. Zerg was just weak before these patches. So when we moved to 8 workers, it's like, okay, we did that, and then we increased hatchery and queen. They're both like the highest price they've ever been. And then, larva buff kind of makes sense under that philosophy where you're trying to like counteract those effects. But then there was issues with Terran where it's like, okay, Terran is like still kind of struggling against Protoss, and what are we going to do about that? And it's like, I don't know, I just felt like, am I crazy, or like wouldn't it have made more sense to just like remove the Nexus starting energy, and like if the larva buff is too strong, nerf it a little more
remove
again?
Shield batteries. Problem solved.
Hey, now you're speaking my language. I think the shield battery is fucking horrible game design.
Yeah, I think shield batteries is just a bad game design.
Yeah.
Just straight up.
I mean, it just allows you to defend with pure minerals and 0 supply. You can just drop shield batteries, and wherever you have them, you have warp-in power, so you can warp in around the shield battery. There you go. You're defending with just minerals, no supply.
Yeah. The inherent problem is that they can, because of shield batteries, they can put proportionally more into the economy. They don't have to make units, which, like, is kind of dumb. Make fucking units.
Yep. I mean, I remember early game Legacy of the Void, like, Protosses used to, like, make safety units in their base. Like, fucking crazy, right? Like...
It was an amount of money that they no longer have to spend.
Yeah,
exactly, right? So they could. So the issue we describe with Protoss is that they scale too quickly. That's still true. The scaling is too quick because they can play too safe and still be aggressive. And Terran doesn't have an option. So, unless you want to increase the, like, what's it called? The research time for Blink or something like that, still the same problem. You got to remove the Protoss's ability to be aggressive on the map whilst being safe.
Yeah.
Shield battery is the easiest way to do it.
I prefer when Protoss is, more... I want them to be scary, but I want them to also be vulnerable, you know?
I want skill expression.
Yeah. Crazy concept, right?
If they outplay me, fair play, right?
Yeah. But hear me out. What if we take cool and interesting abilities and then make them auto-cast, like Immortal Barrier? You know? Sorry. It tilts me so much. It's like Protoss used to require so much more skill, and then they're like, let's just remove all that skill expression, and then Protosses are like, why can't I play my race better? It's like, gee, I don't know.
So, fun fact, the things that Protoss are getting for free in this regard are kind of like what Terran has to do manually. Kind of. Like, the Terran equivalent would actually be, if we had the same ability, I feel like we'd have to press the button. We wouldn't get it on autocast.
Yeah, it's weird, right? Because on the one hand, I agree that the shield battery gives you an absurd amount of safety, but on the other hand, I've advocated for removing starting energy on Nexuses for a while, and for good reason. The simple reality is, currently, what you see is a Protoss player can chrono, drop a recall, and energy recharge, all within quick succession, because they always have the energy to do so. There is never a single situation in which they don't have the energy necessary to do whatever the fuck they want. It doesn't matter if they're chronoing consistently, they're still going to have energy to keep dropping a chrono and drop a recall if they need to, or to keep dropping chronos and drop an energy recharge on a Templar to then drop a storm.
I mean, you're exaggerating a little bit, but like, your point is that Protoss has plenty of energy and they're not like ever really wanting for energy, and I totally agree with that.
I mean, yes, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but the moment they get the third base up, that exaggeration is not a thing anymore. On two bases, yes, it's a little bit exaggerated, but the moment the third base comes up, it's not, because the energy is just always there.
Outside of specific builds, I can't think of vulnerability windows for Protoss at the moment.
Yeah.
Yep. I used to have this thing where like I loved the Overlord Hatch Tech Overlord drop versus Protoss. You know, they hated it, so I loved it. You know, and it was stupid because like at the time, like they were all saying this is undefendable, but like spoilers, it's very defendable. Here's how you defend it: open with a Stalker, and then build a Void Ray out of the Stargate that you're opening with anyway. You're done. Like, oh my god, so hard. You know, but I used to love that build. And it was because it hit during the period when Protoss was actually vulnerable, when they were putting up a whole bunch of gateways, and they had 2 units, and nothing else. And it's like, that's the perfect time to attack them. They just spent a whole bunch of money in gateways, they can't afford anything else, right? Nidus was also good at this time. And then they made it, you know, they changed Nidus a bunch of times, and you kind of can't really do that anymore because they're just going to attack it with the Void Ray and it dies, right? And then they removed Hatch Tech Overlord drops, so you can't do those, right? But it's like, man, back then I even had builds where I would like, I remember I had this one build where I would like go Hatch first to make it look like a normal build, and then I would drop a super early Roach Warren, and then I would bank up gas, and I'd make exactly 4 roaches, and I'd put them around the side of the map, and then I'd have a slow Overlord ready to morph into a dropper. It would pick up the roaches and then like drop them in, and then we snipe the pylon. And it was like, oh, so beautiful. Can't do any of that anymore. You know, not allowed. Protoss has shield batteries now, and Hatch Tech Overlord drops removed. You know? It's like, what is this state of the game? It drives me crazy.
Yeah, and it always feels like comparatively, drag the topic back to Terran, right? Terran's
Yes,
early game
please.
is weirdly like it is simultaneously both extremely strong but also weirdly brittle. Well, and it kind of feels like if you misplace your bunker just slightly to the left, then suddenly you lose the game because lings will run past the bunker, kill everything, or zealots will just fucking obliterate the bunker immediately, or they'll, like, stalkers will just walk straight past the bunker and you don't have enough units, and because marines have less range than stalkers do, you can never actually engage the stalkers that are just going to kite you around the map because they're fucking faster than marines are and have longer range. So there's no real reason not to send your first like 2 stalkers across the map, you know. So if you lose the Reaper, you're immediately on the defensive, and that bunker is now 100% necessary. So what I will say about 300 mineral CC, side tangent, it has made getting a safety bunker a lot easier in the matchup, because now you can actually afford to get the safety bunker in time for that first stalker or adept or whatever to come across the map.
That's
and
cool.
potentially actually hold the early stalker aggression that they sometimes do. And I know that's not something that you really see all that often at high level play, and it's kind of odd to me, but I think part of it is just that most of the time they're still dealing with a Reaper.
Yeah. That's kind of a cool side effect of a horrible change.
True. Yeah.
No, I mean, that actually is, it's kind of interesting.
Quirks, right?
Yeah.
And I do feel like I said, I do genuinely feel like Terran is very brittle early on while also being very strong. But it's very dependent on those very specific timing, you know?
Yeah.
For that strength.
Okay. How do we? So we kind of talked a little bit about this already, but gotta ask. How do you guys feel about Terran build order diversity? Because I was talking earlier about how I'm so sick of watching 3cc 111 every game. I just, wondering, does 300cc help that at all, or has 8 worker start change that at all, or is there anything that is kind of helping build order diversity? Sorry, what was that?
Give me my gas first builds back.
I
had like 12. I'm like, no.
Yeah, because you can't afford it now, right? Like it
you
messes
can't
with your build so much.
You really can't.
It's bad.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I mean, I tried it myself, and I was like, "Oh, you really can't do this. Like, it just doesn't work."
I
Oh, what happened? I lost sound. Why do I not have sound? Oh, hang on. Something happened with sound. Yeah, I don't know what that was, and it looks like Discord messed up. Say something? Hang on, I gotta switch it and then switch it back, maybe. Okay, try again.
I don't remember what we were talking about.
Hey, there we go.
Okay. Gas first builds.
I did a stream yesterday where I tried to play gas first builds, and I lost most of my games with them. I think I did win a silly amount of them, but you just can't afford anything. I was like, let me do gas first and go into like a super fast banshee, and I'm broke and I have nothing, and just like I was getting supply blocked at 80 supply for like 40 seconds. It was great.
Yeah, it's really fucking frustrating because like even double gas builds to some extent feel even more committed than they already were, and there used to be a fair amount of 2 gas builds, but now it feels like a lot of the build order diversity that we used to have, which, again, they were trying to push, just doesn't exist anymore.
Yep.
Like none of it exists anymore, and it's really fucking frustrating.
Yeah.
Because it's like we had all of these builds, and they actively went out of their way to go and throw them out the window.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah. I mean, it's
Thoroughly
like Terran has
balance.
like a Swiss Army knife, you know, lots of different build orders, lots of different openers that you can do, right? And they can kind of mix and match a little bit, which I think is super cool, and like a really cool like testament to the strength of Blizzard design and like how much work they put into making like the add-on system work and like all the numbers kind of match, and I think they did a really great job, you know. And then to go from that to you can't go gas before racks anymore. It's like, wait, what? Like, that was like the first like major build order branch that Terran had, and there were like 2 different family trees there, and we just like chopped off half of that. We're like, nope, you can't do that. like what?
It's fantastic.
Variety achieved.
The one benefit I will say that I have seen is that anytime I play against like those stupid 5k barcodes from like Singapore or something at like 3 in the morning, and they do the dumbest builds like cheese as possible, I move across the map and they just have nothing because they can't afford it. It's like, yeah, you keep doing your 1 base Hellbat fucking drop with Marauders and Reapers and die. Perish.
I also, I beat a lot of barcodes when the new patch dropped too. I remember that. It seemed like all the barcodes were like floundering. It's good times.
There are a couple I can think of that like have one play style. So there's this guy called Marek on EU that's like a 5k Protoss, and all he does is proxy robo on 1 base every single game. Every single game. So I played him since the new patch, and it's like, cool, I have tank, I have Viking, and then I move across with 3 tanks and he dies because he goes into disruptors afterwards and he can't afford it on 1 base. Oof. Like, cool. You keep playing with your prism. You keep playing with your prism. It doesn't work.
All right. So I think I have one last question, I think, because Miro's got to go a little bit early today, and I've been trying not to have these shows go too goddamn long because we have episodes that just last way too long.
Yeah. So
I don't mind. I can hang around if you need.
No, all good. So last question here. Let's see. I'll start with you, Miro. So what do you think are unresolved issues that Terran has that you wish had been addressed by the patch?
Ooh. That's actually a really difficult question. Can we come back to me, because I'm actually not sure off the top of my head.
Nico, then.
I'm gonna palm this off to Nico.
Thanks for throwing me under the bus.
You're welcome, buddy.
To be honest,
I'm not ready either.
We've talked about a few of them. So I think the major one is a little bit of the build expression, but I would argue that is, again, more so to do with the player-based mentality. I just want more options towards sort of the mid-game, because it does feel, at least at a high competitive level, you're kind of shoehorned into playing a couple different ways, and there's not really much that you can really do about it. Like, I really hate the meta. I have always hated playing meta builds, so if anyone watches me, I almost never play sort of meta-ish builds, even if I can play them, and yeah, just there doesn't seem to be like any alternatives raised. Like, it requires a fundamental overhaul of not only Terran but just of the other races as well. Like, if they're gonna go for changes like this, they need to fuck around and, like, I don't know, make Marines anti-armored and Marauders anti-light or something like that. Like,
Whoa.
Do something that we can like play around with. Like, as is, changing the economy doesn't change the dynamic of the game, I don't think, because that's already been figured out.
Yeah.
Yeah, the thing that
we've had
frustrates
like
me on
16
this
years
subject.
of this foundation. Sorry, go ahead.
The thing that frustrates me on the subject is like that you didn't need to revert the 12 worker change to make this happen. And if you wanted to fix diversity issues, which obviously was the original point of the goal of the change, then you could have brought back a bunch of early game builds that we used to have that you have actively gone out of your way to remove. Right? And I kind of feel like that hasn't really happened. There's nothing. They wanted to slow down the game, but they haven't actually done anything to achieve that. The 8 worker start change didn't do that. All it did was push out the first 30 seconds of the game.
Yeah.
That is literally all it did. So I'm not going to keep harping on
Take
that
it or
point.
leave it.
12, thanks.
That's multiple sticks. I'll take it.
Yeah, true. But on the subject of like what Terran feel like it's lacking, it's very hard for me to say because Terran generally feels like a fairly complete race to me as far as how it is generally designed. There are very clear weak points in its design in terms of like the unit design. You know, the siege tank, as an example, has very clear-cut counters and very clear weak points, but also very clear strength. And I feel like most of Terran's units have that. Like we don't have any bad units that aren't the Reaper.
You beat me to it. No, I mean the Reaper's great. It's just not great past the early game. You know, yeah.
The Reaper is great until you have to get more than 5 of them. Basically, if you have more than 5 of them and you're
not already winning the game,
and you're not already winning the game, then the Reaper's fucking useless. But beyond that, like pretty much all of our units are really good. Shoot me, but I do feel like the battlecruiser needs a complete overhaul from the ground up as a unit, because it feels really stupid to use, and 2,
Make Yamato the main weapon.
Underwhelming. It feels really underwhelming.
The main weapon with the same fire rate and move and shoot, right?
Walk up, Yamato like 8 buildings, teleport back across the map, walk back in, Yamato 8 buildings, come back.
StarCraft saved.
Yeah, like if I was to sit there and go, this is something that needs to be fixed. Yeah, fucking battle cruisers need to be fixed. Sorry.
Yeah.
I actually think the Raven as a unit is in a great spot. I think, despite the controversy around the Ghost, I don't actually hate the Ghost changes because it feels very. After becoming light, it feels like it's very killable from the Zerg perspective because of how much more frail they are against Banelings.
Yeah, I really like the light
and
change.
like EMP is fine and has always been fine against Protoss, contrary to their popular opinion that EMP is the most destructive spell in the game. Clearly, like I'm sorry, but that's such bullshit.
No. I can't. You just argue this, right? You remember the Uber Storm they have? That was Protoss EMP.
Which one?
Which one?
Yes.
In the storm we had for like all of the game, what was it? 80 damage, 4 seconds.
Like,
it was 80 damage over 2 seconds.
2 seconds.
Yeah, it was 2 seconds. It had 10 ticks. Yeah. It was like 2.5 seconds at most.
In proportion to us, it was the equivalent of EMP. That the storm they have now is basically an EMP.
How much damage does EMP do to shield?
100.
It's 100
right?
shields,
Yeah.
but the reality is actually not as much because most Protoss units don't have 100 shields.
Do not have Stalkers of 80. The big reason Protoss hate EMP is because if they get hit by the EMP, the Stalkers get one shot by libs.
At +2. Yeah.
At +2, yes.
That makes sense. Yeah. But like, libs are only good if you have a lot of them, and if you got to the point where you have a lot of libs, you're probably doing a pretty good job as Terran. Just being real. True.
But also the Protoss player is just an idiot and never transitions into Tempests or gets Skybox upgrades.
All right, stop. You're going to get me canceled by the Protoss Cabal.
they left the game. What do you want about?
True.
I am so ready to be controversial. Like, just Terran perspective, featuring
Oh, man.
brackets again. Controversial, Nico. Look,
No, I mean, honestly,
I am fully
it's
aware I'm getting cancelled.
honestly, it's not that far from how we usually talk on this show. We've been quite a bit of Protoss
okay.
bashing in the past.
Yeah,
Which is why I
true.
wanted to focus on their perspective last week, but after hearing all that, I gotta get back to my Terran bros. I gotta talk to them and see what they.
Exactly. I mean, if it makes you feel better, my stream the other day, I think it was not yesterday, the day before, I had Fiant, I had Larimbo, I had Mixu, I had GG Machine, all in my stream, and they had like 15 viewers at the end of the stream. It's just like I summoned the third Cabal. I don't know how.
Well, we'll have to summon the Zerg Cabal next week, because next week we're gonna be talking about Zerg. But I think that's gonna be it for today. Unless you guys have any other closing thoughts you want to leave before we go.
No, do you have like any other questions about just stuff in general, or because
No, I think
to be
I
honest,
think this is a pretty good chat.
have you guys like talked about sort of like how grandmasters and like higher level players tend to view the game? I'm kind of curious.
What do you mean?
With
Tend to
Richie
what
and
at the game?
Groovy, yes, we have with Richie and Groovy in the past.
Nice.
I actually missed
nice.
his
Interesting.
question. But you were answering.
How Grandmaster players tend to view the game.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah. We've talked to a few.
That's interesting because to be honest, I don't have those types of conversations often. I know I'm very, very strange in how I view it. Like, I mean, I'm just a strange player in general because I still manage to get supply blocked for like a minute and a half on average every game, and I still beat 6k players every now and then. It's kind of insane.
I like it.
I don't know how I do. I genuinely don't know how, but like
You're shoving the units so hard that you're just hitting the supply block before
Kind
everybody
of.
else normally would, you know?
kind of, yeah. So when I'm learning the game, and this applies a little bit in how I teach it as well, I don't necessarily focus on mechanics because I find people too regimented in how they sort of like learn the game or teach almost. In the like people like, oh, you need to know exactly this kind of build. For example, you guys were talking about the hatches at the start of the stream, and I was like, I don't know when they get the third hatch. I just scout for it. I get a general vibe, and if I'm like by 3 minutes 30 or something, they don't have it, I'm like, cool, he's probably doing something 2-base.
Yeah.
And then I don't like have a library in my head of being like, okay, 14 hatch is the most optimal. I need to go 3 racks and play 14 out. Like,
I don't like that way of
that
thinking
stuff
about
like
the
that.
game.
No,
Yeah.
I have never learned any of that. So, like, if people ask me, like, okay, what's the specific timing for your third depot when you play this build? I'm like, I have no fucking clue. I'll play the build and I'll play it correctly, but that's because it's in
And
proportion
you play on
to the...
EU server, right?
I play on EU and NA.
Oh, okay. See, that's interesting, because I've always... We're getting a little off track here, but I've always kind of thought that what you're describing with, like, the hyper-specific kind of scouting, where they're, like, clicking on people's gas to see how much gas they've mined in order to determine what opener they're doing, things like that. Like, that feels like a very EU mindset of how to play the game. And as somebody who plays on NA, it's like, you almost can't do that, because people don't play the game that way on NA.
Yep. Like, I vibe check my opponents by having Marines in their mineral line.
Yeah.
That's it. Like, at that point, it doesn't matter.
All right, well, I think we gotta I gotta end the show
Make
here. We'll
chaos
keep
and
chatting
war.
forever here. It was a blast having you on, Nico, and Miro, as always. Really glad having you on as well. Glad
It's
to
been
have
too
some
long, man.
Terran
Thank you for
thoughts
having
here.
us.
Yeah, it was great. It was good to have some Terran thoughts, because yeah, you know, like I said, we've been kind of trying to focus on each of the races' perspectives here. I think it's been helpful. So I appreciate it, and hope to have you guys again in the future sometime. And for anybody
I'll learn
watching,
for next week. Don't worry.
cool. And for anybody who's watching in now or in the future, if there's anything you feel like we left out, you know, leave it in the comments. Let us know, and we'll probably check it out next week or something like that. And I hope you all enjoyed the show, and we will catch you all next time.